to another episode of Forward Momentum. On this episode, we are going to tackle the charging system, specifically the alternator, and what to look for and how to diagnose if you are having issues with your alternator and need to replace it. This episode will also cover how to replace your alternator. So let's get started on what to look for if your alternator starts to go out on you. My first indicator was this battery light illuminated on my dash. So that led me to check the charging system. Now I happen to have one of these cool replacement USB things with voltage on it, and I'll link it in the video description if you're interested in it. But that's actually pretty cool because you can kind of monitor your voltage. You can see it's low. The car is running at 11.7, and if I blip it, you can kind of see what happens here. Not much, right? So the alternator is really not doing much, and I think the spec on the alternator is 13.2 to 13.8 or something. So I'm running low voltage, and that's why that light is on. Now I don't recommend driving the vehicle like this because you can see that my voltage is, I'm gonna say, dangerously low. 11.4 is not good. To release the tension on your belt to get it off, this is your tensioner here, and you're going to use a 14mm socket, and you're just going to push down on it, and hopefully that loosens the tension enough to get the belt off of there. And you're going to have to fish it off all the pulleys, but carefully, and there you go. Almost. Normally I pull the negative off, but in this case, I'm actually going to disconnect the positive also. And the reason is, if you were to ground this underneath on the frame somewhere, you theoretically create a short down there. Now, if you want to make ultra room, you can pull your electric fans out. You could even take this lower radiator hose off. But I'm going to try to do it like most normal people would do it, with the exception of the fact that I have a lift. I'm going to raise the car up. I really think that access to this alternator is easiest from the bottom. To get it out, you're going to have to take this power steering pulley off, which is pretty easy. I think it's a 17mm. Sometimes you might have to gently tap this to get it out, but I stuck a little punch in there, and then it really doesn't require much, and I broke it loose. So now I'm just going to spin it off by hand. And just gently tap that outer rib, and you can see it's loose already. So now I can take it out by hand. I remember my OEM pulley was much more difficult. Okay, one last thing that you can do is you can break this, I think it's a nut, break that one loose right there. Here's your alternator. You got two attachment points. The one I haven't undone is right here. And of course, I'm gonna switch over my cool XAT Racing pulley, and there's gonna be some electrical connections towards the back that we're gonna have to deal with. And that thing should just kind of slide right out of there. You can move this high pressure hose for the power steering, yeah. So you can move that out of the way. It should come right out. This is a ground. There we go. You're gonna need that bracket that you just saw because the new one doesn't have it on there. It's coming loose now. Oh yeah, this thing's ready to come out. The power steering pump is directly above the alternator, and you can see that mine has some oil residue on it. This may be a good time to address the power steering. I don't see any dripping onto my alternator. Once I pull it off, I'll have a better look at it. That can cause premature failure. If you have that issue, you may want to deal with that now so that you don't ruin your brand new alternator when you put it in. I think there's actually two here, so there's one more. There's a lot of little notes here I have for you guys. Make sure that your ground wire surfaces are clean and not oxidized or covered in oil. So that's something else I'm going to do. Next challenging part is going to be getting this top connection off. And it looks like I might be able to get a ratchet up in here or a ratcheting wrench right here on the top and undo it. And just break it loose. And this will be the last connection, which is the wiring connection or the positive. I have the nut, I'm spinning it. And once it's spun off, I should be able to pull that connector up and off. I spun the alternator 180 degrees and now you can see what I was dealing with blindly. So that last connection there, you need to squeeze right here and then wiggle it and try to get it to come out of there. Connection is squeezed, and with the flathead, it should come out right there. Well, I didn't show it on camera, but you can actually get the alternator out this way, but you have to kind of go up high and then bring it back down and spin it, and it'll drop out. These are your connections. Just want to show them to you. You know, make sure that you wipe off oil residue and clean them up a bit. This is a good time to check that power steering pump further that I was talking about for leaks. You might have to switch over a couple things off your alternator. This is the old alternator, 24 years of residue on top. I'm gonna switch this off of it, compare it to the new one, and make sure that I get everything over that I need. Of course, that pulley, gonna get that switched over too. For some reason, you need to change your pulley over like me because you have an aftermarket one. It's going to be a 22 millimeter, and you're probably going to need an impact gun. That'll get it right off there. This is the angle to get the new one in. So right here, you go in at this angle right here, and then you can pivot it once it's up in there. And now you can make your connections over here and then continue to pivot it around in order to mount it. You can see right there, that'll allow me to get my connections made, get it mounted up into the stud up there. It's a 12 millimeter, and I'll use a ratcheting wrench. And just be real careful that you don't drop your alternator on your face. Get it all the way around that plastic. Next, I'm gonna make this connection up here, but you're gonna have to turn your alternator a little bit so you don't stress the wires. And then there is a cover on this too. I know you can't see it right now, but make sure you slide that cover up and over that connector. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick this alternator up and get it onto the stud. Right there. To go ahead and hand tighten the upper nut, you want to take this bolt and you can turn your alternator and clock it a little bit until you find the threads. And then don't forget your ground, which will attach to this bracket here. Next, power steering pulley goes on. This is the XAT Racing power steering pulley that weighs about half as much as the OEM one. So if you're interested, go to XAT Racing and check it out. I'm gonna go ahead and get that placed onto the pump. Make sure you get whatever you wedged in there out. Here it is, loose fit. I'm gonna put a 14 millimeter on a long ratchet, and I'm gonna go to the left on this bolt. It's a reverse thread bolt. It's gonna push this tensioner down, release the tension off the belt, and allow you to slip it around those last few pulleys down there, including the alternator. So there's your tension. And once it's released, you should be able to slip the belt over. Double check that all your ribs are aligned, especially on the crank pulley, because it'll just shred it. Everything looks okay, then go ahead and release your tension. Oh, make sure it's lined up on your tensioner pulley also. And release the tension. Yo! All right, ready to fire her up. hope this episode has helped you in the prospect of having to replace your alternator, how to test it, how to do the job, and then how to make sure that it actually worked. Make sure you address that power steering pump. It's a known issue on these cars for it to leak and drip down on the alternators and cause premature failure. So make sure you check that out. If you haven't already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. See you on the next episode.